The first thing this forest steals is your echo. The second is your name. These 4 true encounters from the Smokies aren't campfire stories. They're warnings. A 3-note whistle learns your hitch, repeats you perfectly, then asks for help in your voice and follows you home. The air itself hardens like glass in a narrow gap, bending light and deciding who gets through. A shelter grows an extra bunk after dark. A polite weight settles inches above your face and asks if you can move your feet. And on the drive down, an unlocked rear door opens by itself, and a passenger you never invited rides until he finds the wall he remembers. You'll hear the high ping, then the lower click. You'll smell wet pennies and hot dust. You'll feel the cold turn intelligent around your hands. Remember the rules. Never answer yourself, break straight lines, leave space for the 12th, and don't trust the mirror or the rear view. Stay to the last line. If 3 notes ring later from your kitchen, don't move. Something out there has already learned you. You ever hear a sound that changes the way you stand in the woods? Like it nudges a new muscle into your spine, one that's only for bracing against something you can't see. For me, it's a 3-note whistle. I was section hiking the Smokies in early October, trying to knock out the stretch from Newfound Gap up toward Tricorner Knob over 2 nights solo. Weather said overcast. In the Smokies, that means the world turns to wet paper. Fog was already sitting in the gap when I shouldered my pack and stepped onto the white-blazed path. Evergreen needles bled the sky into threads. I remember the air smelling like wet pennies and pine. Also, some kind of sour musk that I chalked up to feral hogs. Icewater Spring Shelter is only a few miles north, but it feels like walking along the ribcage of a sleeping animal. One misstep and you feel how high the drop really is. My boots went quiet on the packed duff, and the fog seemed to absorb my breath. I got to the shelter mid-afternoon, one of those 3-sided stone lean-tos with log bunks, a fire ring out front, and bare cables down the slope. The spring whispers across the trail like someone shushing you. I picked the inside corner bunk and spread my bag. The world was ghosts of trees by 4 o'clock. People drifted in as the day went gray. A father and his teenage son from Knoxville. He introduced himself as Doug, and the kid was Cade, milky blonde hair and a hoodie that hadn't known a washing machine in weeks. A quiet woman named Lena, section hiker like me, with a headlamp permanently strapped across her beanie. And a guy everyone started calling Papa Bear because of his beard and how he had a story for every blister. We cooked under the eave while a fine mist worked into the seams of everything. My stove hissed, Doug's pot rattled, someone's packet of noodles boiled over with that yeasty smell. The conversation turned the way it does at shelters, gear, miles, bears, the thing someone swears they saw a few nights back. Papa Bear laughed when the topic of weird noises came up. "It's the thrushes," he said, stabbing at his pot. "They sound like a flute if you're new to it." "Thrushes don't whistle at midnight," Lena said without smiling. Her voice had a tired edge I recognized. She told us she was an EMT back home. I nodded. Same job, different county. She and I compared sore shoulders and bad calls until the light thinned out completely and the fog took over. We did the bear hang with our food bags on the cables down the slope. The forest at that hour is an ocean. You hear things moving because everything is moving. Water dripping, needles sighing, something small skittering over a log. On our way back to the shelter, Cade whistled to his dad, just a quick 3-note thing to guide each other through the soup. It rang thinly through the trees, then quiet. I wish I could cut this next part out of my life. The first time I thought it was an echo. The same 3-note whistle came back a minute later, the exact spacing, a hair softer, not from the direction of the cables, from somewhere higher on the slope behind the shelter. "Y'all hear that?" Papa Bear cocked his head. "Probably some drunk ridge runners messing around," Doug said, but I saw him glance at Cade. We all went still. Mist was beating on the shelter's roof and spattering down the front. Headlamps made halos in the air and barely touched the tree line. The whistle came again. Same notes, precise. You could have measured the space between them with a ruler. Thrush, I asked, but my voice sounded like I was joking. I was. Lena shook her head. Wrong cadence. Papa Bear cupped his hands and whistled back, a different pattern. Silence. We leaned into the fog like it could carry a sound better if we made a hole for it. When the answer came, it wasn't his pattern. It was Cade's. That same three-note call he'd made to his dad matched perfectly, but this time there was a little catch on the second note. The same hitch he'd done without thinking. "Okay," Doug said, voice low. "Let's not play with it." "Could be a hiker," I forced out. "Someone lost." "Then why not call out?" Lena asked. It was getting late, and we didn't have a fence on the shelter front like the old days. No door to shut, just an open mouth that led to our sleeping bags and the rest of our lives. We decided to keep the fire going and tuck in with boots nearby. The flames fought the damp. Sparks went up and immediately disappeared into the wet air. I went to top off my water at the spring. The path is a little slit of mud with dark roots like bones. The whistle reached me down there faintly from up the ridge. It changed a hair. It added a fourth note, a high little squeak at the end. And in my stomach I felt it. That sound was the exact squeak my cookpot lid makes when I spin it without lifting it. I'd been doing it absent-mindedly at dinner. "Hello," I called, stepping onto the path back up. "If you need help, say help." Nothing for a few seconds but a drip, drip, drip. Then, soft and strangely flat from somewhere deep in the trees to my left, he-yelp. It didn't sound like a person. It sounded like a recording, like there were no lungs attached to it. I got back to the shelter and didn't want to scare anyone, but I think my face told on me. Lena turned her headlamp into the trees and didn't move. "It said help," she whispered before I did. We stood there, 5 people breathing like we were hiding from a cop, watching fog breathe in and out of the spruce. Pine smell, wet wool, a small wind that touched nothing. The whistle came again, close enough this time that it felt like it went under my skin. Same 3 notes, same little squeak. "Hey," Papa Bear stepped forward, anger or bravado making his voice boom. "If this is a joke, knock it off." I raised my light and walked the beam across the open side of the shelter just to check our stuff. My headlamp turned the bunks into low cave shelves, our packs hunched like sleeping dogs. The floor was damp with footprints. Fine, we'd all tracked in wet. But when I moved closer, the prints changed. Not lugs, not vibram, not boots, bare feet, small, a trail of them. They led from the open edge straight to my sleeping bag. The whistle sounded again, this time from inside the shelter behind me, almost against my ear. I spun so fast I smacked my shin on the bunk. My headlamp blew a hollow tunnel through the fog inside the shelter, and for a second the light caught something small and orange swinging by my sleeping bag. My whistle, the little one built into my sternum strap buckle. It was moving like someone had just let it go. I didn't think. I yanked my bag back and the light washed over the floor prints, bare, small, not kid cute long toes, the kind that flex and grip. The mud was shiny and new, as if the foot had been wet for a long time. They came from the open mouth of the shelter, tracked right to where I dropped my bag, looped along the side, then turned away and vanished at the bunk's shadow. No lugs, no treads. "Everybody back," Lena said, low and steady, and it had the effect her voice was meant to have on ugly car wreck nights. She was already moving to the edge with her headlamp raised, scanning. Papa Bear stood, fists up like that would help against fog. Doug put an arm out across Cade's chest. Something tapped the roof light, a polite knock on tin. There's no tin up there, just old wood and a patch of metal over one corner, but it traveled like tapping on ductwork. Tap, 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 pausing, then 2 quick taps, then 3. I felt it in my teeth. I put my hand on my whistle. It felt slick. I lifted it and sniffed without thinking. Metal, pennies, I almost gagged. Behind us, out in the trees where the trail slips by, a voice said, "He-yelp," but it came through wrong, flat, like a radio check. Then another voice, our pitch and cadence, played back. "Y'all hear that?" Except it was my voice from 20 minutes earlier. "Don't answer it," Lena said. "Don't talk to it." Cade was shaking his head. "Nope," he whispered, breath quick. Nope, 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 like that could ward off whatever the world was doing. Doug squeezed his shoulder. Papa Bear cleared his throat like a man trying to move the fear out of it. We pulled our pads and bags farther back until our shoulders brushed the cold stone of the back wall. I dug out my foil emergency blanket, and we used paracord and 2 trekking poles to rig a crinkly flap across the open front. Not a door, but something to look at besides black. The blanket's silver belly took our headlamp beams and turned the shelter into a lit shoebox. It also turned every outside movement into a shadow. The 3-note whistle came again, from just on the other side of that foil. It did Cade's pattern exactly, including the hitch. Then, like it learned the next thing, it added that squeak at the end that only my cookpot makes. The foil fluttered as if breath had pushed it. Go away, Papa Bear said, steadying his voice by making it louder than it wanted to be. We can't help you. The foil indented. Not a hand shape exactly. 5 little dimples lined up, pressing in, then spreading like toes. Through foil, through cord, through our stupid idea of a door, I could hear myself breathing. I could hear Cade's teeth clicking together. I could hear 1 drop of water fall off the roof and land on a rock like a metronome for somebody else's song. Back to back, Lena said again, and we did it because that order felt like a rope we could actually hold. We stood or crouched, 4 lights pointed outward, 1 dimming because batteries hate the cold. We didn't talk. We let the night talk. It used our names next. It did it in pairs. Cade, in Doug's voice from the left. Dad, in Cade's from the right. Lena, in a high whisper that wasn't hers and wasn't mine either. It was the way some patient in a dark room once said her name, and I didn't need to ask to know she remembered. We waited it out because there wasn't anything else safe to do. Time went soft. The fire ate itself and turned to the slow red of last coals. The tapping moved across the roof, away, then overhead again, then down at the far end near the bare cables, as if someone walked the edge of our world on hands and knees. At some point, it tried the zipper on Papa Bear's pack. We heard the tooth click. He reached without looking and set his palm on the top of the bag. The zipper stilled like it had to think about the new rule. Don't let it take anything, Lena whispered. They like to keep pieces. Pieces of what? Cade asked, voice small. Sounds, she said, whatever you give it. The foil flared as if a wind had hit it, and a bunch of wet maple leaves slapped against it from outside and slid down, leaving smear streaks. For a beat, there were prints on those streaks, those same long toe shapes. Then they faded as the wet dried. At what I think was 3 in the morning, the sound changed. Not the whistles or the radio voices. A soft, low hum, almost a tune, like someone blowing across a bottle and trying to make words out of it. It circled the shelter at that hum until the sky lightened enough that the fog went from black to the gray of paper that's been handled by too many people. When the light felt like it had weighed again, we lowered the foil. The world outside looked chewed. The duff was scuffed in lazy spirals. The bare cables swung like a clock had been pushing them all night. In the mud by the spring, I found the strangest thing, a little ring of pebbles with an acorn cap set in the middle. The cap had a perfect pinhole poked through it. If you lifted it and blew, it made a thin, airy squeal. I didn't blow it. I didn't touch it at all. We didn't make coffee. We didn't write in the logbook. We packed with speed and quiet and started south. Single file, no jokes, no music. The fog went with us, hanging in loops at knee height, and every 100 yards or so the woods would breathe and the 3-note call would drift from off-trail, like someone just beside us had cupped their hands and whistled. We didn't answer. We kept our heads down and our feet on the white paint and let the trail decide we weren't interesting. Just above Newfound Gap, where cars sound like a different kind of river, the fog thinned enough to see gravel. Doug's pace broke. He put a hand on Cade's back and I felt my own shoulders drop an inch. We stepped out of the trees into the parking lot like we'd crawled out of a story that had decided to keep its ending. I glanced back at the trailhead sign. There were 3 small, wet fingerprints right at the corner of the board. 3, not 4, not 5. We split there, different vehicles, different counties. the kind of stiff goodbye that says we've been welded together by a thing we're not going to name. I checked my pack at the tailgate. My sternum whistle had a hairline crack in it I swear wasn't there before. There was a smear on it that had dried to nothing. I told myself that was the end. I told myself that for a week. On a Thursday night back home, I was boiling pasta with the same little pot and lid. Music on low. Window open a couple inches because my apartment is old and the stove likes to throw heat. I spun the lid with my thumb and it made that stupid squeak I never noticed before this trip. I froze, thumb mid-spin. From the alley from just below the open window, 3 notes answered me. Mine. Then the tiniest, airy squeak, like someone learning how to make a lid sing. I didn't look. I turned off the burner. I stood there with my hands shaking over water that had stopped boiling. The whistle didn't come again. The next night, I moved the kettle to the back burner and kept the window shut. I haven't been back to ice water since. Sometimes, walking past a crowd, I hear those 3 notes and I tell myself it's just a bird. But every time the second note catches, just a hair, in a way I recognize like my own name. You know that feeling when you put your hand out in the dark and you expect empty air, but something stops you. Not a wall, not a tree, just the air itself going solid. I learned what that feels like at Derrick Knob Shelter, and the worst part is, you can't see the thing that stops you, but it can decide whether you pass. I was hiking in late October, the kind of cold that makes the spruce smell sharper. I came up from Spencefield with my legs hollowed out by the climb and my head clear, in that way it only gets at 4,000 feet. Derrick Knob sits tucked in the balsam like a ferry terminal for ghosts. Stone, log bunks, bare cables down slope. A piped spring trickling somewhere behind you like a constant whisper. Cloud ceiling low. Wine just a breath. There were 4 others when I arrived. A dad named Randy and his daughter Maya on her college break. An older guy who told us to call him Buck, a retiree who speaks with his shoulders, and a ridge runner finishing her sweep name tag said CLEST. Everyone had that Smokies look, wet cuffs, red cheeks, a little humbled. No fire because the park had posted a warning about drought, so we huddled with our stoves under the eave talking soft. Mice popped like bad ideas in the leaves. The shelter log was full of bear stories, weather notes, and one entry that made Celeste frown. Don't line up the posts at night. What's that mean? I asked. Buck tapped the page with a dry finger. Doorways, he said. Old places have 'em. I grew up not far from here. My granddad would say, don't walk true between the twin trunks after dark. He meant where trees make a frame. There's a gate there if you hit it at the wrong time. Celeste gave him a look, but not a full skeptical one. There are pockets up here, she said, choosing her words. Cold spots, compass weirdness after storms. Folks get turned around, just be mindful where you point your light. The brain finishes what it can't see. We did the bear hang in a little parade down to the cables. The ridge sat quiet. No thrushes, no owls, just the weight of the woods pressing in. When my bag hit the hook, there was this quick, hard ping like a small metal latch clicked shut somewhere behind me. Not loud, sharp. Randy's head turned and so did mine. Celeste held up a hand. Hear that? She asked. That wasn't you. I shook my head. It sounded like it came from the space between 2 black trunks upslope. Not from the cables, not from us. On the way back to the shelter, I cut to the spring to top off my bottles. The path dips and the canopy grows close. 2 firs there lean in like old men arguing. I stepped between them and every hair on my arms lifted. Heat left my face. The air got that smell, ozone, hot dust on a rattletrap heater. My left ear popped. I could see my breath in a short, white rope that hung between those 2 trunks but not a foot beyond. Something in my body didn't like it. I backed out, took a circle around a rotten log and came in from the other side. Nothing weird. No pop. No smell. The spring gurgled like it always does. I tried again, quick, just to test if I was spooking myself, and when I put my boot through that narrow gap, the temperature dropped 5 degrees like a refrigerator door opened. I didn't linger. I filled fast and clambered back to the shelter, not excited to try to explain. The air felt wrong to strangers. After dark, the shelter turned into a small, bright island. Our headlamps flattened the world. The fog moved in bands. We told the kind of trail stories that start with a laugh and end with all the punchlines still in our chests. Buck brought up the logbook note again. "Don't line up the posts at night," he said, glancing toward the 2 spruce that made that tight V by the spring. "Gates like straight lines. They like neat." "Tunnels do too," Maya said, half joking. "And people." She tugged her beanie down and stood to head to the privy. "Back in a minute." Randy hovered. "Want me to?" "I'm fine," she said, rolling her eyes the way daughters do to fathers who are pretending not to be scared of bears. She took her red headlamp and slid into the fog. The click came again, metal on metal but distant, like a latch. Celeste stiffened. Buck stopped talking. Randy called out, "Maya," no answer. A full beat. 2. I felt the shelter stone move under my foot with my heartbeat. Her headlamp bloomed at the edge of the trees about 20 yards off. She was headed straight for us, but not quite where the path is. She looked wrong somehow, like her legs were working in syrup. Randy went out to meet her. He took 10 steps. She took 10. The space between them did not change. "Hey," Randy said louder now. "Stop, come to me." "I am," she said, her voice clear but thin like a battery-fading radio. "Dad, just stand still." He did. She walked. The distance stayed the same, like a number that won't flip. I moved up beside Celeste without thinking. My stomach dropped the way it does in a stairwell when you expect one more step and it isn't there. We were watching something that broke the rules. The fog had drawn a soft rectangle between 2 trees and their mirror pair across the little trail. The light from the shelter made those trunks look like posts. A frame. Neat. Buck hissed through his teeth, "Don't line up the posts." Randy lost patience and charged a little. He hit nothing with a sound like a dull thump, like a basketball checked hard. He stumbled backward onto his hands. "What the?" He reached forward slow this time with both palms. They met air that wasn't air. His fingertips skated on something invisible and stiff. He flinched like it stung. "Maya, stop," he said, voice ripping. "Stop where you are." Celeste grabbed the paracord from her pack and tossed Randy one end. He looped it around his wrist. She pulled on hers and the line went straight. Then, halfway between them, it bent 90 degrees, hard like it had snagged on a brick corner floating midair. My mouth went dry. "Don't pull," I said. "You'll cut it." The cord was singing, taut and humming. Frost crystallized along its angle, blooming white in an instant and then melting. The smell of hot pennies came back like a hand over my nose. "Okay," I told Randy, trying to make my voice square and useful. "Stay put. I'm going around." I wrapped the other end of the cord around my waist, snug twice like we do in Swiftwater. Celeste caught my eye. "If it doesn't want you, it won't let you," she said. "No drama in it, just a fact." "I need it to want me," I said. "Keep your light on the angle." She did. The fog edge glittered like heat over asphalt. I took one breath to steady my legs, picked a spot where the line bent and put my boot into nothing. The air grabbed. Somewhere close, something clicked once like a lock turning. Then a second click, lower, deeper, as if the world on the other side was answering. The cold held my shin like a hand. My headlamp blew a short, fat cone of light that curved. Light shouldn't curve. The cord at my waist hummed and Celeste's voice rode it to me. "Slow, don't shove it, feel for the seam." I put both palms out. The air felt like glass that wasn't dry, slick, buzzing the way your hand tingles after the blood comes back. If I pressed too hard, it pushed me out. If I eased, it let my fingers slip along like I was testing a window I didn't own. 2 inches. 4. I found the angle where the paracord bent into nothing. It was sharp. My glove snagged on nothing and scraped anyway. "Talk to me," Randy called, voice ragged. "Can you reach her?" "I see her," I said, and I did. Maya's red headlamp sat like a berry 20 steps off, but the way she moved made my eyes feel wrong. One knee lifted, set down, lifted again. The ground under her looked like it was rippling slow, as if her feet were finding stairs I couldn't see. "Dad," she said. It sounded like she was speaking through a floor vent. "I'm trying. It's like walking inside a rubber band." Buck moved to my shoulder but stopped just shy of where I had. "Don't stand in it," I told him. "Break the frame instead." He got it fast. He took his trekking poles and leaned them at angles across the two near trunks so their lines weren't true anymore. "Crooked is good," he muttered. The hum in my palms changed, not low or wider. The cold seeped into my sleeves. I slid forward another inch and found a lip where the slickness stopped and a different feeling started. A thin, moving skin like the air there had grain. It pushed at my fingertips like a stream. I followed that current to the bend. There was a space the size of a shoulder where the pressure eased, a gap not meant for a whole person. "Okay, Maya," I said, trying to keep my tone steady the way you do on bad scenes. "Don't look at the shelter, look at me. Turn your shoulders sideways. Step toward my voice, not the light. Sideways like you're sneaking past a crowded table, 1 foot over, then in." She laughed once, a scared sound. "This is the dumbest dance," she said, and did it. Her outline slid sideways and there she was, closer by a hand's width. It felt like a trick, like a magician's coin, but the air at my chest changed pitch, and the paracord at my waist went tight, slack tight, as if something had plucked it. Celeste crouched near the post we'd made out of nothing. "I'm clipping you," she said, holding out a little brass carabiner. She hooked it into the paracord between my knot and her hand and gave it a tap with the back of her knife. The tap made a clean, bell-like ping that shivered in the fog. It sounded like that first click, but friendly. The bend in the line twitched. The frost that had crept along the angle melted in a long tear. "Randy," I said, "hold that end steady, don't pull, don't slack." He made a noise that was all father and did it. I slid my hand through to the gap until my glove went from buzzing cold to nothing. My skin felt like it wasn't mine for a second, then it came back. I stretched and my fingers closed on a sleeve. "I've got you," I told her. "Do not grab my arm, just my hand." She obeyed, good kid. Her palm was hot like a fever. I pulled, gentle at first, then with a steady, mean line. The air tried to keep a piece of her. Her pack snagged and yanked her backward. "Unclip," I said. "Dump it." She hesitated 1/2 second, then she did the smart thing and shrugged out of the straps. The pack hung, suspended on nothing, a dumb floating shadow. Whatever this was like that. It kept the pack like a tipped jar. Lightness ran through the cord at my waist. That gap at my chest opened like a mouth, and I hauled her through. We fell on our knees into cold leaves that were regular, blessed leaves. Randy made a sound I won't forget. He crawled to her. Buck backed up fast like a man stepping off ice. Celeste didn't move. She held the line absolutely still, eyes on the bend, breathing slow. "Don't say thank you," she warned without looking at us. "Don't name it. Don't close it with a word it can keep." So we didn't. We just breathed loud and stupid and alive. After a minute or an hour, the angle in the paracord softened. The hum slid away into the trees like a low truck on a far road. We let the line sag. The cold left like a crowd leaves a room, first all around, then in patches, then only in the corners. The 2 posts were just trees again, wet and indifferent. We slept in shifts, or pretended to. No fire. We faced the woods in pairs and tried not to line up anything with anything. Somewhere around 2, I heard the little friendly ping again, and then the other click that isn't friendly at all, from a different spot, near the privy. Every time I shut my eyes, I saw the pack hanging on nothing, tugged by a wind we couldn't feel. At first light, we packed in silence. Maya wouldn't look toward where it had been. "I'm sorry about the pack," she told me, and I shook my head. "It wanted something," I said. "Better the pack than you." Celeste wrote in the logbook. She didn't write much, just, "After dark, don't make straight frames with your lights or poles. Don't walk true between twin trunks. If the air goes solid, back out crooked." Then she drew a small square, unfinished, 1 corner open. We moved fast toward Siler's bald, all of us a little sideways for a while. as if our bodies didn't trust straight lines anymore. By newfound gap, Randy had his hand on Maya's shoulder like it was part of his arm. We split in the lot with that welded together, not saying it goodbye. Celeste squeezed my elbow. "Sometimes they follow you to town if you give them a clean doorway," she said, like talking about weather. "Keep your furniture messy for a week." I laughed like a person and went home. The first time it happened after, I was at a grocery store near closing. Empty aisles. The automatic doors at the front made a perfect rectangle with the freezer doors behind them and the glass over the manager's office. I pushed my cart, hit nothing, dead on, like a checked basketball. The air was slick and humming against my wrists. The smell of hot pennies walked right up my nose. There was no fog, no forest, just fluorescent lights and a bored kid mopping. I stood there in a flood of bright and bumped the cart left, opening an angle. The hum dropped and the cart rolled through easy like the store had decided to like me again. I haven't said thank you. I keep my chairs at bad angles and my doors half shut. And some nights when my apartment goes very still, I hear it in the hallway, the gentle ping, then the lower click, like two sides telling each other goodnight through a frame I try not to make. If you've never tried to count bunks at Tri-Corner Knob after dark, don't. Your eyes tell you one number. Your gut tells you another. And when the fog is thick up there, the shelter itself seems to breathe and make room. I came up from Icewater late in November. The spruce needles rhymed and the air wet enough to chew. Tri-Corner sits up in that high, quiet place where even the birds seem like they're whispering. It's a stone three-sided shelter with wooden platforms along the back and side, and a table in the middle that's seen more noodles than woodworkers. Bare cables down the slope. A spring that talks in its sleep. The kind of spot that makes you feel like the world ends 20 feet from your boots and then repeats. By the time I got there, the light was already going gray. 4 people were in, shaking their hands warm over stoves under the eave. An older woman with a red bandana introduced herself as Dot, retired teacher, legs like rebar. A couple from Asheville, Luke and Tanya, who moved like they'd been hiking together a long time. And a quiet thru-hiker named Nico with a shaved head and a calm, wintered look that said he'd learned to keep a bead on things and not say much. "Plenty of space," Dot said like a host and smiled without showing teeth. "Pick a plank." I glanced at the platforms and counted quick, the way you always do, just measuring like you measure exits in a movie theater. 2 big lower shelves, 2 uppers, enough for 10 if people squeeze right. "Capacity 12, I said out loud because the sign said so. "Looks like 10, Tanya answered, "unless you like to sleep in the rafters." I took the upper on the left where a draft moves along the wall and keeps the mice less friendly. My bag unfurled with that dry sigh, and for a half-second it felt good, like a little home. Nico chose the far corner, lower level, back to the stone. Luke and Tanya shared an upper on the right. Dot took the remaining lower, right near the front so she could see whoever came and went. The fog wrapped itself around the opening like felt. We cooked with the stoves hissing like tiny snakes and the pot lids clacking. The smell was all salt and tea and wet wool. Conversation found its lazy rhythm, where you started, where you planned to finish, the weather that doesn't care about either. Dot pulled the logbook over and flipped to a page someone had decorated with a drawing of a crow. The entry under it was short. "When the clouds sit, leave space." "Leave space for what?" Tanya asked, laughing just enough to cover the little shiver we all felt. Dot tapped the page. "There's a story at this shelter," she said too lightly, like a teacher trying not to spook her students. "Always seemed like 12 people fit, even when we counted 10 planks and 10 bodies. My daddy used to say Tri-Corner keeps an extra bunk for those who get caught in it. Hunters told it. Old CCC boys. You don't turn away the 12. Nico shrugged without looking up from his pot. "I've seen extra people on a rainy night," he said. "Not ghosts, just late arrivals. You make room." "Sure," Luke said, but his eyes slid to that open edge and back. We took our food down to the cables in a little line, steam moving with us like we carried our own ghosts. The bare pulleys creaked once, clear and small, and the cables sang. Somewhere upslope, a branch tapped another branch in the wind like polite knuckles. When we turned to go back, fog braided through the trees in bands. Our headlamps pushed hard and still only made tunnels. A little before full dark, a pair of hikers showed up. A young guy with a trash bag poncho and a woman with mud up to her knees. They were jumpy in the way people get when they've pushed through the last mile on fumes. Names, Aaron and Jay. They took the center table to sort. Full, Aaron asked, eyes doing the same math mine had. Sign says 12, Dot said. We're at 6. Jay cracked this grin that didn't have strength left in it. Cool. I count, He counted the planks with his finger like that might make more appear. 8 spots then, 9. 12, Dot repeated, but she didn't lift her finger from the logbook. We shuffled the way you do when more bodies change the geometry of a space. Luke and Tanya scooted and made a little gap. Nico slid his pad closer to the wall. I pulled my bag tight to the corner. Aaron took the lower under me. Jay set up on the lower near Nico. It felt full enough. I told myself the numbers were just a trick of angles and fog. We didn't make a fire, too wet, too late, too something else. We let the night fill the room. The mice came like a rumor, tiny feet whispering over the boards. Someone's spoon clinked in their kit. Someone else's zipper rasped like a small saw. The fog stood in the doorway like it had shoulders. When we finally killed the lamps one by one, the dark in that shelter had a weight. My breath made a small white rope in the beam and then nothing. I don't know what time it was when the first creak came. I was in that drifting place, the kind of sleep that keeps one ear up. The sound was simple, wood under a slow weight, up then down. Bunk boards speaking to each other through old nails. I opened my eyes to black. The shelter was a box of damp breath and slow breathing. I could place Nico's soft snore. I could hear Dot clear her throat. I could hear the couple shift and mumble. And I could hear someone climbing a ladder. We don't have a ladder here, I thought, and a cold drip ran down the bridge of my nose. I reached up with one hand and felt above me. My palm met empty air and then rough wood. The board above me vibrated like a living thing, just enough to say there was weight on it. There is no above me, I thought again. I had taken the top shelf. Another creak, dust powdered down in a little sheet. Something outside thumped once, soft like a pack set down. Someone else made it, Dot whispered from the front, voice tiny as a mouse. Who? Tanya asked back, not much air there. 9, 10, Aaron's voice like she was counting in her sleep. 11. I slid my hand sideways along the wall to where the posts are, the way you reach for a light that isn't there. My fingers brushed fabric where there should be nothing, canvas, damp, cold, a seam. My heart stopped and kicked. Hey, a voice above me breathed. It was close enough to move my hair. Can you shift your feet? I froze. My socks were touching the end board. The voice sounded like it came through cloth, friendly and wrong. I grabbed my headlamp and clicked it on. The beam hit 3 feet of wet wood and a corner of stone and stopped like it had struck a wall. The beam bent down. A shadow of slats crossed over me where I knew there were none, dark lines that didn't match the boards I'd seen in daylight. The ladder creaked again. Rungs that aren't there at Tri-Corner. Someone rolled in the bunk above my face, and dust sifted into my open mouth. I spat and aimed the light straight up. There was a platform there that hadn't been there, close enough to touch. And inside the edge of my beam, something shifted like a person pulling a bag over their head. It was canvas. That's the first word my brain found. Old, thick canvas, the kind that goes soft with age and damp. The beam hit a fold and slid off like it didn't want to stick. A sour, mousy smell came down, mixed with wet wool and old smoke. The board above me flexed with a slow breath, a long, patient wait. Can you shift your feet? The voice asked again, close enough that my hair stirred. Polite, familiar in the worst way, like a friend in the next bunk, except there is no next bunk up there. I pulled my heels in tight against the wall. "Yeah," I said, and my voice didn't sound like mine. "Sure." The canvas slid, a small drag. Dust sifted down in a fine line on my cheek and tongue. I spat, wiped my face with my sleeve, and flicked the beam sideways. It didn't help. The light went dull and yellow against nothing. There were shadows of slats where there weren't boards, lines that didn't match the wood I'd seen in daylight. "Don't stare," Dot whispered from the front, voice so thin it barely got across the room. "Leave space. Don't count." "What?" Luke's whisper had teeth in it. "Just don't say 12, Dot said. "Don't finish the number." Erin, half asleep below me, murmured 910, like she was still in that dream. I leaned down fast and soft. "Hey," I whispered. "SHH, don't count, okay? Not tonight." She went still. Somewhere near Nico's corner, a zipper rasped once and stopped. Something tapped wood, a rung sound, a ladder that isn't there, slow, then a pause, then another rung. "Is someone above me?" Tanya asked, voice small and tight. "Yes," the voice above me said, and the word moved over my face like breath through cloth. "Don't talk to it," Dot said, but the warning had no weight. We were all already in it. The weight on the knot bunk shifted again, a slow drag that made the old nails complain. I slid my hand into the corner where the wall and ceiling meet, where I knew there was nothing, and my fingers brushed a seam stitched and waxed, rough as a scar. I felt stenciling under my glove, raised by paint. Letters I couldn't read in that angle, then numbers. 3, 6. I angled my light and caught a wash of faint green. A canvas roll marked in a hand that didn't know Sharpies, Co 411. A year that fell heavy in my mouth even before I said it to myself. 1936. My spine turned to ice water. "Can I?" the voice said, and the pause was long enough for me to think it didn't know the next word. "Can I borrow your cup?" I looked over the edge of my pad to where my metal mug sat. The air in the shelter felt like wet paper. "Leave it at the lip," Dot whispered. "Don't hand it." I slid the mug to the edge of the platform. The canvas above sighed. My headlamp caught the shine of metal rising, slow, like a kid's magic trick. The mug disappeared into the dark that shouldn't be there. I listened to my own blood, smelled old smoke and iron. A few seconds later, a liquid sound. Not a glug, more like a careful pour from very close. The mug came down again, set neat as a coaster on my board. It was half full. A film skinned the surface, not oil, something silt gray that clung to the rim and then sank. I didn't touch it. My breath made a tiny ripple on it, and the ripple took a second too long to die. "Thank," the voice started. "Don't say it," Dot hissed, quick and sharp, and the word died against my cheek like a moth hitting a window. I lay as still as I could and tried to breathe around the weight that wasn't supposed to be there. The shelter listened with me. Outside, something put a pack down, soft. The bare cables whispered. The fog tasted like a cold coin. Maya from the last story would have said, "Make it crooked," but there was no angle to break here. Just a full room and a number we were all trying not to make. I counted heads in my mind and stopped at 11. My mouth filled with the copper of that number, and I had to swallow it down. Time went out of shape. The ladder rung sighed once more, stopping just above Dot. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. The whole shelter held its breath like a classroom when the principal walks in. At some depth of night I couldn't measure, howls lifted from way off on the slope, coyotes, or the ones that aren't. A second later the weight above me shifted like someone rolling to face a wall, and the canvas pulled over with that bag sound again. The knot bunk creaked like a bed remembering itself. I drifted and woke and drifted, and every time I woke the weight was still there, an extra person in a room that shouldn't have room for extra. I kept my feet in tight. I kept my palm flat on the board as if it could tell me when the shape above me decided it needed something. Sometime near dawn, a thinner dark, a quieter fog, the pressure lifted, not fast, like a held breath finally going out. My headlamp had long since killed itself to a weak glow. In that weak light I saw the dust above me where the beam would reach again. No shadow slats, No wrong geometry, just old wood and spider webs, a little torn where something had been. Erin slept with her mouth open below me. Jay's boots lay by his pad with a sprinkle of grit on them that hadn't been there, fine white powder like old plaster. Nico had turned to face the wall. I could see the line of his shoulder moving with his breath. I watched it longer than was polite. We got up with the gray, quiet in the way people are after a night they can't explain. Tania rubbed at a black smear on her sleeve that smelled faintly of creosote. Luke pretended not to see that his mug had a new ring around the inside, a pale ridge like it had aged in a cabinet overnight. Dot passed me the logbook and a blunt pencil. Someone had written a short line on the page with the crow in a hand that pressed too hard. When the clouds sit, leave space. Under it, a second line, lighter, older, laid on top like a ghost of graphite. Co 411. Much obliged. The date next to that second line read 3/17/37. The lead was shiny like it had just been laid down. None of us said a number. We packed like we were in church. When we stepped out to the front, there were boot prints in the damp duff. 11 sets we could account for by boot brand and tread. And one set that wasn't ours, sharp-edged, small squares in a V, the kind you see in photos of men standing with shovels, hobnails. They led from the open mouth of the shelter to nowhere. They stopped between two fir roots and did not start again. We left food we could spare on the table, not as an offering, as a habit you pick up when a place tells you it keeps space for someone other than you. We walked out into a morning that pretended to be normal. The fog thinned to strings and then tatters. In the parking lot days later, I caught myself counting my seats as I tossed my pack in. 1, 2, I stopped. The number stuck behind my teeth like a fish bone. That night in my apartment, the upstairs neighbor's bed frame creaked above my ceiling. Except I don't have an upstairs neighbor. I live on the top floor. The sound came again. A slow rung, a pause, another rung. I pulled my feet in without thinking, close to the wall. And from the somewhere above that is just plaster and dark, a polite voice I knew too well breathed through the paint. Can you shift your feet? If you drive US 441 over the Smokies after dark, check your rearview twice. That's what I tell people now. You don't expect to see someone in it who didn't come through a door. I was coming off a late shift in Gatlinburg in early December. Wind had a bite. Fog sat low enough to make the road feel underwater. I told a buddy I'd swing up to Newfound Gap and make sure his cousin got a ride down. It's not far on paper. It's a different country at night. The spruce hold the cold. The clouds sink into the parking lot and don't move. Newfound Gap at night is a big black bowl. The stone walls, the flagpole, the memorial, everything looks carved out of wet chalk. There were maybe 3 cars left when I pulled in. Park bathrooms were locked. A Ranger truck rolled by and kept going. Somewhere out in the soup, a raven made a sound like a hinge and stopped. I sat with the heater on low and the radio down. The headlights were just enough to make a pale triangle on the mist. On the 4th minute, my eyes started to make shadows into people. On the 5th, one of those shadows stepped out of the fog and became real. He stood by the stone steps with a pack at his feet and a trash bag over his shoulders like a poncho. Tall, calm, not waving, not walking up like a rush job. He just stood and waited for me to decide. I rolled the window down an inch and the cold hit my teeth. "You headed to town?" he asked, voice soft, the kind of tone people use when they need something but don't want to scare you off. "Gatlinburg," I said. "I've got space." He nodded once like that was settled, didn't smile, didn't say thanks. He moved around to the passenger side and opened the door careful like he was trying not to set off a chime. The light inside made his face look flat and pale, not sick pale, just undone by fog. He put his pack on the floor by his feet. The thing wasn't nylon. It was canvas, damp and dark, with leather straps and a double buckle like an old mail bag. It leaked a line of water that ran to the door seal and stopped. "Name's Eli," he said, and he buckled his seatbelt with a soft click. I told him mine and pulled out, tires thumping the rumble strip that keeps you honest. The yellow lines flashed in and out. The fog swallowed the world 10 feet from the hood. We slid into that long, slow downhill where the trees lean in and make a tunnel. My wipers ticked on low. Radio went to static and back. Eli kept his hands folded over the trash bag in his lap like a choir boy. "How long you been waiting up there?" I asked. He took a breath like he had to think about air. "Long enough to get cold," he said, the hint of a laugh in it. "Wasn't sure if you saw me or if I was just standing." His clothes smelled like creek water and old smoke, not campfire from tonight. A smell that pretends to be warm and isn't. "Where you heading exactly?" I asked. "Just down," he said. "Morton's would be good." "Morton's Overlook," I glanced at him. He was looking straight ahead, not at me, not at the road. "Why there? Not much to." "He'll get in there," Eli said, soft, like we'd already talked about it. "He likes the wall." A little static walked up my spine. "Who?" I asked. "My brother," he said, and he said it like that explained everything. He rubbed his palms together like he was scrubbing dust off them and didn't get any cleaner. "He's slower in fog, hangs back." The heater kicked and a little fog bloomed on the inside of the windshield like breath. I wiped it with my sleeve and checked the mirror out of habit. The back seat was empty, my coat thrown on the far side. Just me and Eli and the white tunnel of road. We came around that blind S-curve where the rock wall sweats year-round. A thin sheet of water dribbled across the pavement and made the tires talk for a second. Eli braced like he knew the spot. He wasn't jumpy, just ready at the right time, the way some hikers know where the slick roots are without seeing them. "How old's your pack?" I asked, nodding at it. It had a rectangle of cloth stitched on the flap with numbers I couldn't make out. He touched the canvas like it could wake. "Been around," he said. "It holds." The road leveled for a breath and then dipped. The sign for Morton's flicked by in my high beams. White letters, brown board, the kind of thing you only see because you know it's where to look. I turned in and rolled to the stone wall, front tires kissing moss. The overlook was an ocean of gray, nothing to see. The wall glistened like the back of something alive. Eli sat forward a little, the way you lean when you're trying to hear a voice in another room. He set one hand flat on the dash without thinking. "There," he said, not pointing. "Pull up a hair." I put the car in park. For a second there was nothing but wiper tick, engine hum, my own blood in my ears. Then the back right door lock popped up with a clean, mechanical click. I didn't touch anything. Eli didn't move. "Don't turn around," he said very gently. "Let him do it." The inside of the car got 2 degrees colder without the fan changing. A draft came over my shoulder, not from the vents. It smelled like wet leaves and old pennies. The fabric seat behind me creaked, the sound of weight, real weight. In the rear view, the empty seat stayed empty. My coat lay there. The cushion next to it sank a shade. Just a shade, like someone kneeled there and put a hand on the edge. "Hey," Eli said to the air behind my right ear, like a brother calming a brother. "He's giving us a ride." My belt tightened a notch by itself. The middle buckle ticked against plastic. Something exhaled near my neck. It didn't feel like lungs. It felt like cold sliding down a throat. The back passenger door handle lifted with a neat little click, like a hand without bones had found it from the outside and knew how it worked. The door opened itself 3 inches, enough to bring in a blade of fog. The seat behind me dropped like a weight sat down. I didn't turn. Every nerve in my neck wanted to, but the way Eli's voice had gone soft made it clear there were rules. The air in the car changed, colder, damp. My breath fogged once, then steadied as the defroster fought it. The passenger door eased itself shut with a clean click. The dome light didn't flare. The lock pegged down by itself. "Okay," Eli said, as if talking to the road. "We'll ride easy. He'll sit quiet if you don't look." "Where to?" I asked, and my voice came out a notch higher than usual. "Down," he said, "all the way down." I slid the shifter to drive and eased back onto 441. The tires found the wet rotor sound. The beams tunneled through the fog and made a white wall with 2 yellow lines disappearing under it. The radio drifted into a station for half a second, fiddle and a voice older than my father, and then fell to static again. A cold spot bloomed on the inside of the rear window like a hand leaned there from the wrong side of the glass. The shape stayed, a shoulder, a head that didn't fog quite like a head should. "You two hike up together?" I asked, to make my mouth do something other than lock shut. "Mostly," Eli said. "Sometimes he lags, he likes the stone walls, he stops at them, checks the corners." "Corners of what?" "You don't need to know that part." "Fair enough." We rolled through a stretch where the trees crowd the pavement and the rock face sweats across half a lane. My headlights hit a shine and the steering wheel ticked as the tires rode a chilled sheet. Before my foot could decide what to do, a sound came from behind my right ear, not a word, not a breath. A fingernail on plastic. A little tap-tap on the headrest. Then the seat belt over my shoulder tugged once, neat as a driver's ed instructor. I eased off the gas without being told. A deer slid out of the fog on my left like it had been poured, eyes dull yellow in the beams. It walked across both lanes like it was in a different movie. If I'd been on the gas, if I'd twitched, I would have spun it. We missed by inches I could feel in my teeth. "See," Eli murmured, "he's better at this part than I am." Every hair on my arms had opinions. I kept both hands at 10 and 2 like I was 16 again. The heater fan thumped once and steadied. The fog had that iron taste the river has when you dip your hand in it in winter. As we passed the pull-off for the Chimney Tops Trail, Eli said, "Not here." His fingers twitched on the trash bag like he wanted to touch the window and didn't. "He doesn't like this one, too much burn." I nodded and wasn't sure if I'd said it out loud. The burned ridge was just a darker shape inside the dark, but I could feel the heat that had been there years ago, a ghost you can taste. The back right door lock ticked twice like a nervous habit. From behind me, a sound like knuckles brushing the fabric of the seat. I could picture a hand spreading on the cushion as if feeling where the seams were. We dipped past Campbell Overlook, turned through the slow S where the wall goes from waist-high to chest-high. The fog braided like smoke over a stovetop. Eli's breath thickened, then steadied. The radio tried a station again and caught a hymn for 2 notes, low voices, low being the only word I made, and slid away like a hand leaving a banister. "He likes the walls," Eli said, barely above the fan. "Not much happens to a wall." We reached the long right-hand curve above the big stone bridge. My rear view was useless, but my eyes kept sneaking to it like they had a leash. Empty glass, my coat laying like a slumped passenger. And yet in the bottom corner where the defroster hadn't cut through, someone had written with the pad of a finger. 4 letters, simple, a child's ghost, slow. The O had a tail where their finger lifted late. I swallowed. "Got it," I said, and I did. We slid under the trees with that word hung in the mirror like a speed limit the park didn't post. By the entrance to Sugarlands, the fog thinned a shade and the world got edges again. Signs took shape. The river sulked in the dark to our left, a cold sound. I could see the glow of Gatlinburg smearing the low cloud like when you rub graphite with your thumb. The seat behind me shifted, not forward, not back. Like someone leaning to look out the right window, which is nothing at that stretch but laurel and rock. The lock pegged up, then down again, a boy flipping a switch because it makes a good click. "Where do you want out?" I asked, because the town was coming and I didn't know if wherever they were from had rules about city limits. "Bridge," Eli said. "Before the lights. He can't hear as well once the neon gets loud." There's a small pull-off by the stone bridge just shy of the park boundary. I drifted into it and left the engine idling. The world beyond the windshield went from white to gray to the suggestion of trees. Eli unbuckled, the click steady. He didn't reach for the door. He turned his head a little, just enough to talk over his shoulder to a seat my eyes told me was empty. "You good?" he asked. Something changed in the smell, wet leaves, cold iron. The depression in the fabric eased and then deepened, as if a man had stood and then sat again to tie his boot. The back right door lock popped up with that friendly mechanical patience. The door cracked itself 3 inches. Fog climbed in like it was invited. "Wait," I said, because I didn't know which one I was talking to. Do you need me to take you farther?" Eli smiled without showing teeth. It looked like the fog had taught him how. "He doesn't go farther," he said. "He rides until he can find the wall he remembers. Then he checks the corners and waits." "For who?" "For me," he said, and there was a little apology in it. "For a long time I didn't come." The weight behind me lifted, not like a ghost floating up, like a person standing in a cramped space and finding their knees. The door opened to a foot and stopped. The dome light stayed dark. Cold crawled across the back of my neck and was gone. A damp, ferny smell blew in and turned the car into a trailhead for 1 second. The door closed itself with that same careful click. The lock pegged down. The chill faded in a slow exhale. Eli reached for his pack. The old canvas had gone darker in the damp, but the leather straps looked new for a breath, like someone had just oiled them. He set his hand on the flap and didn't pull. He looked at me the way you look at a driver as the last bus of the night pulls up. "You did fine," he said. "Where do I?" But when I turned to finish that sentence, the passenger seat was empty. The seatbelt lay flat, the buckle still warm under my fingertips like it had been held. The heater fan made a sound like a sigh. The pack was gone. My floor mat had a line of water drying in it, angled toward the door. I sat there with both hands on the wheel until a Ranger truck hissed past and splashed me with a ribbon of wet road. I put the car in gear and let the headlights carry me into Gatlinburg's smear of color. Tourists will tell you the neon is comfort. That smell of sugar and fryer oil is a blanket. That night it smelled like the end of a story I didn't understand. I didn't sleep well. Every little click the apartment made had a twin I could hear in the car in my head, the soft bump of a lock, the hush of a door catching. The next morning I went out to drive to work, coffee in one hand, keys in the other. The glass had fogged a little from the night. Someone had traced 4 letters low on the inside of the rear window where my hand would never reach. Slow. The tail on the O was longer this time, as if the hand that made it had gotten braver. The back right door lock pegged up by itself and pegged down again, polite as a nod. I don't drive 441 at night unless I have to. When I do, my eyes stay off the rear view. Most days, the back seat looks like a back seat. Some nights, the fabric sits a shade lower, like a tired someone taking one more ride to a wall only he can see. From the 3-note whistle at Icewater Spring to the invisible gate at Derrick Knob, from Tricorner's extra bunk to the passenger in the back right seat at Newfound Gap, some trails don't end at the trailhead. If you wander the Smokies after dark, remember, don't answer your own voice, break straight lines, leave space on the platforms, and resist checking the mirror. Night remembers your shape, and what rides with you often knows the way home. If you've had a true encounter, share it, we're listening. Until next time, keep your lights low, your doors half shut, and your footsteps on the paint. Which story scared you the most? Comment below and subscribe for more true horror stories.